Okay, the final item of business this evening is a members' business debate on motion 16155 in the name of Mark Ruskell on Save Local Libraries. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Mark Ruskell to open the debate. Around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking members who signed my motion to bring this debate forward? And I'm sure members will wish to thank communities who fought so hard to save our libraries, and also to thank librarians for their tireless work. Now, I was delighted to host library campaigners from across Scotland and the professional body SILIPS in Parliament today, and we had an insightful discussion with members at lunchtime. And I welcome those who've joined us in the chamber and many more who are watching online. Now, we have seen an outpouring of love for our libraries in recent months, showing how critical they are to the health of our communities. And especially in this post-COVID age, when there are real dangers of social isolation and misinformation at large. Now, 7 libraries across Perthshire have been threatened with closure, from Alyth to Auchterarder, from Burnham to Comrie and Scone. And libraries that will remain open are likely to see their hours cut from April this year. Most of these are rural libraries, and once they're gone, they'll be gone forever. But I've been to some big demonstrations in Perthshire and online meetings throughout the winter where people have told warm-hearted stories of how important libraries are to them. And it's clear that libraries are about so much more than just book borrowing. So in Scone, I learned about how vital the library is for older people to come together and share memories, especially those suffering dementia. And these reminiscence groups are one of the few places where sufferers can escape the fog of dementia and feel truly heard. One constituent pointed out that because the local primary school doesn't have its own dedicated library, the services at Scone Library have helped to fill that gap. While in Burnham, a father told us how his family have borrowed hundreds of books, while our mother told us how visiting the library is a highlight of her daughter's week, encouraging a real love of reading in her and all her friends. So across Scotland, libraries host workshops and activities that really benefit the community. There's knitting and toddler groups, and every library in Scotland offers free or low-cost activities like BookBug, designed to support early years development. And these activities are vital for communities, helping to connect the local community and build support networks for people at all stages of life. Libraries are often the last free, warm facilities available in many rural communities. They are genuinely a lifeline. So it is ironic that closures are being proposed to make savings for Perth and Kinross Council when this is clearly a false economy. Perth and Kinross Council spend less on their library services than any other council, despite having the second highest usage in Scotland. And removing warm, free spaces that combat social isolation will have a negative cost to the council and health services in the long run. So it's no wonder that Perthshire's communities have mobilised against closures, organising petitions and working together. They have a positive vision, and it's about thriving libraries, not just fighting closures. Communities have been meeting with Culture Perth and Kinross, who are the arm's-length company set up by the council to run the libraries. And admittedly, CPK are in a difficult position. Years of underfunding from the council have meant they're now at the point where they either shut services or pass them over to community-led management. But rural communities in Perthshire are already being asked to take over other services which the council has retreated from. Volunteers can only do so much to backfill cuts. Community-led management might be an option for some libraries, but negotiation cannot take place under the threat of immediate closures. Negotiation has to be respectful. The cuts must be taken off the table first. Now, the council is also exploring options such as click-and-collect style services, more mobile libraries, but these should be an additional service, not a replacement. Once again, libraries are not just about borrowing books. They're about so much more than that. Closing local services will also force people to travel further. So should Burnham Library close, for example, residents will either need to travel for half an hour to Perth, or they'll have to negotiate a dangerous junction on the A9 to head north to Pitlochry. Both options costly in time, costly in money. Now, the council has options. This year's budget settlement provides the flexibility to stop these cuts this year. In fact, the Council's Finance and Resources Committee was meeting this afternoon to scrutinise the administration's draft budget ahead of a final decision later this month. So it looks like communities are finally being heard on this issue, and there is at least a stay of execution that can be agreed. But I think it's fair to say that Perth and Kinross Council have overstretched their resources on projects like the Perth Museum without fully considering the impact on core library services. While Edinburgh has introduced a tourism levy to invest millions into its cultural offering, thousands of overnight stays across Perthshire currently bring in no levy income at all, and that needs to change. Many campaigners across Scotland feel like they're on a treadmill with proposals to cut libraries being brought back year after year. 53 libraries have closed across Scotland since 2014. Many more are now slated for closure. So this is a critical time right here, right now. And Perth and Kinross is not alone. So in my region, library closure proposals in Stirling are back again for consultation, while Clackmannanshire Council are proposing cutting every single library except one. Now, the Scottish Government's Public Library Improvement Fund is a welcome source of project funding, but it does not stop this systemic reduction in core funding that we're now witnessing. Redefining what constitutes statutory library provision, especially in rural areas, is desperately needed, and I would welcome a commitment from the Scottish Government tonight to explore that. Because what constitutes adequate provision is currently a very low bar in legislation, as is the requirement around consultation. And as we look to the next library strategy in 2026, this is the time for government to connect with grassroots communities and library professionals, hear their voices and act to protect the future. Libraries must remain the beating heart of our communities, and I look forward to reflections of other members and the Minister in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Ruskell. It will surprise nobody, I'm sure, that this evening's debate is very heavily oversubscribed. We will need to extend it, but even so, I'm conscious with a delayed decision time and a number of events that are on here this evening, I'm going to have to ask members to stick to their time, if not less, and I will be cutting them off if not. With that, we move to the open debate, and I call first Christine Graham, to be followed by Tim Eagle. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Graham.
Warning duly noted. I congratulate the member on securing this debate, and this is not the first time I've leapt to the defence of our public libraries, and I welcome too those in the gallery and beyond who are listening. Before I go on to libraries in my constituency, one of the reasons I am the beneficiary of 2 degrees I attribute to my then local library at Blackhall in Edinburgh. Stuck for somewhere to study at home, we were 5 children, stretching from age 1 to 16, the 16 was me, in a cramped council house. I sought sanctuary in that library and stumbled across critiques of Shakespearean plays, which I'd been studying for my hires. I never knew such books had been written and couldn't put them down. That A pass in higher English passported me to university. That in itself led to a career as a secondary teacher, then solicitor and politician. Thanks all to Blackhall Library. I don't know if they'll thank me for being a politician. Indeed, as a novice teacher, my own education improved leaps and bounds thanks to the wonderful eccentric Dorothy Devlin, then the librarian at Woodmill High School in Dunfermline, my very first posting. As a team, I think we made English as a subject worthwhile and even fun. She also stood her ground against an attempt to censor her stock of books. There was something wild and radical about her, so even though she had a bun and specs on the end of her nose, she put paid to the assumptions that librarians are boring. They are radical. Today there is the internet, of course. It's useful, but it cannot replace the feel and look of a book, and there are no annoying pop-ups. Fast forward decades, and as an MSP, I do 2 of my surgeries in local libraries, Newton Grange and Gore Bridge. Indeed, these are due this Friday. Like many libraries, they go beyond books. There are CDs, newspapers, not only providing a spot for a politician, but internet access and training. There are under 5 reading groups, book bugs, mums and toddler sessions. Indeed, I frequently encounter a crawling toddler as I listen to a constituent's concerns. I am also well acquainted with the wheels on the bus and other ditties. There are folk for whom the library is a destination where they can pick up a book or two and have a wee chat with the librarian and keep warm now that the winter fuel payment, at least for this year, is gone. Politics. I do even better and am provided with a cup of coffee and, depending on the duty librarian, a biscuit or two. So I'm right in there, in the thick of it, with what libraries are all about. And I'll end on this quote, "Libraries always remind me that there are good things in this world," close quotes. This is from Laura Ward, an American singer. So, let's keep our libraries, with all the diverse opportunities and spaces they provide, right at the heart of their communities. And if they try to stop one in my constituency, I'll be right there, barracking at the doors. Thank you.
Exemplary timekeeping, Ms Graham. I now call Tim Eagle to be followed by Claire Baker. Up to 4 minutes, Mr Eagle.
Well, thank you very much for that, and that was a very lovely speech. Can I thank the member, Mark Ruskell, for bringing this today? I think it is very important, and can I apologise for not making the lunchtime event. Unfortunately, I had another meeting on, but it would have been fantastic to have met the many campaigners that I'm sure were there this afternoon. But I desperately wanted to speak about this, partly because of my position as an ex-councillor, which I'll come on to in a minute, but also to talk about the very many things that Christine Graham's just talked about, the value of libraries to our communities, because we use them at different stages of life. You know, as a young child, I went to a library with my mother and enjoyed reading the books there. As a growing student, I went there to learn and to look at find books from what my school teacher was telling me about. At university, I used the library a lot. And then, when I had children myself, it was not just a weekly, several times a week we would go to the library and sit on the floor and read the very many books, more than I could ever provide at home for my young children. So I've never enjoyed when people talk about the amount of people that go into the library or put it down to simple numbers, because that's not what a library is about. It's not, some weeks you might get more, some weeks you'll get less, but we all use them at different stages of life, and that is the value to me of libraries. And I also associate myself with the remarks about the librarians. They do fantastic work, and they do more work than just about books now. They point you to housing, they point you to computers. They are amazing. And I have never walked into Buckie Library in my own community and not received a warm, smiling welcome into that library. So I absolutely think they do a brilliant job. But the reason I wanted to speak today is because of the pressures that I faced in 2017 and that many councillors face now. I walked into Murray Council in 2017 absolutely eager. I'd been a community councillor, I was heavily involved in my church and in many other aspects of that community, and all I wanted to do was to serve the people of Buckie. And the first week we were there, the chief executive took us all to the side, all us new councillors, and we had presentation after presentation after presentation that told me I had no money, I had to cut budgets, there was nothing I could do, and it was all frontline services. I have never felt so distraught in my life. Honestly, that week was so pressured to me. It was more than coming in here for the first time last February. It felt awful. But that is the pressure our councils are under. I have yet to meet a councillor, and please tell me if there are some, I have yet to meet a councillor that wants to shut a local library. They don't exist. Nobody wants to do that. But we are forced to because of budget pressures. And that's the point I think is absolutely essential to get across, that we want our councillors to keep these libraries open. But I do call on the SNP, I do call on this government to really think seriously about why we are even talking about this here. And it's not just me saying that, because it is the Accounts Commission, it is COSLA, it is Fraser Ballinger, it is Audit Scotland, all these independent organisations that are telling us that council funding has been cut. But not just that. Absolutely.
I'd just like Tim Eagle to square that with the £1 billion in tax cuts that his party would put through, and what further pressure that would put on local government budgets.
Tim Eagle.
I was just about to be nice as well, because I was going to say that it's also about the pressures on councils, because we have faced abnormal pressures in adult health and social care, to say the least. The budget conversation that we are having is about growth. We are a low-tax party. We are a small state party. That's what the Conservatives stand for. And actually, that is perfectly reasonable in this day and age to have that viewpoint. And actually, we do believe we can take Scotland forward in a low-tax economy. In fact, our businesses might agree with that. But I think that is the point. If this government isn't going to give more money to councils directly, but if you do want to save libraries, and it'd be interesting to hear what the Minister says at the end, it will be absolutely crucial that he puts a further pot into place to protect our local libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. I now call Claire Baker to be followed by Liz Smith. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, President Officer. I'd like to thank Mark Ruskell for bringing this debate to the Chamber today and join other members in welcoming campaigners who have joined us in the gallery. Unfortunately, I was unable to meet with the campaigners at lunchtime today due to a prior commitment in Fife, but I do recognise the work that those involved in the campaigns have been doing and continue to put in, and acknowledge the correspondence I've received from concerned constituents. The Scottish Book Trust last year published a report on the value and impact of Scotland's libraries, a quote from which is highlighted in one of the briefings for today's debate, and I would like to share it. Nowhere else in modern life, whether urban or rural, is there a public space where anyone can enter and remain without the expectation of payment or labour. These institutions are vital for every person in Scotland, and they are endangered. So, Presiding Officer, for children, libraries are gateways to literacy and learning. I know how important Kelty Library was for me, and I remember the excitement of graduating to an adult card at 14. I remember the books I also took out. They provide access to a diverse range of books, fostering a love for reading through various challenges and encouraging exploration of new genres. Programmes like BookBug not only introduce young minds to the joy of stories, but also offer new parents a platform to connect, build social bonds and support maternal mental health. For adults, libraries offer quiet spaces conducive to work and study, helping reduce household expenses by providing a warm, free workspace. They can serve as hubs for skills development, digital access and community engagement. And as others have recognised, for older people, libraries are vital in helping combat social isolation. They offer opportunities to engage in lifelong learning, participate in community events and access resources that might otherwise be out of reach. The proposed closure of a number of libraries in Perth and Kinross, most of which serve rural communities, has prompted many constituents to contact me concerned at the plans. Libraries such as Alyth, Scone, Burnham and Comrie are key parts of those communities, and people are worried they are going to be lost. I have corresponded with Perth and Kinross Council and Culture Perth and Kinross about the plans, and they are clear to me the decisions are being driven by financial considerations, repeated in a reply that I received from them today. I have asked the Scottish Government to consider if there is any action they can take to prevent closures being required, and I have asked Perth and Kinross Council whether they would look again at funding decisions following budget announcements. I am particularly urging the Council to reconsider plans regarding the North Inch, given its importance as a school library. I hope this will be taken into account in forthcoming budget considerations. Of course, libraries have running costs, and the financial pressures on our local authorities means they need to look at where savings can be made. Campaigners are keen to explore different kinds of funding, but they also know that if a library closes, it is unlikely to reopen, which is why they are calling for time to develop sustainable solutions that acknowledge and leverage the pivotal role libraries play in our communities. Consideration could be given, for example, to targeted funding that could support libraries as part of educational and social infrastructure. And some are also looking at management models and whether direct council control would be more efficient. We will all agree this evening that libraries are invaluable resources as well as part of our communities, and I hope that a solution can be found that means they can continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Baker. I now call Liz Smith to be followed by Richard Leonard. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Smith.
Thank you, and can I add my thanks to Mark Ruskell, for it is an extremely important debate, and like him and several other members in the chamber this evening, I attended the recent rally in Perth City Centre, and I have to say my inbox has been full of constituents who are expressing in very vivid terms just how upset they have been about potential closures. And that's the reason I raised the issue at First Minister's Questions back on the 12th of December. And I was grateful for John Swinney recognising the role of libraries. But I have to say, until now, I hope the Scottish Government can recognise just how strongly local people feel about this issue. Because those constituents, many of whom are in the gallery this evening, who are facing local library closures in Cymru, Auchterarder, Alyth, Scone and Burnham, they're all making the point that in a budget year that could see council tax rises of quite substantial amounts, they want their services to reflect the payment. So if you're going to ask constituents to be paying more, then they don't want to have fewer services, and I think that's a very valid point that's been put by so many of them. Now, that demonstration, I think, had somewhere between 200 and 250 attendees. And it's credit to the campaigners within the Save Our Rural Libraries group who've done, in my opinion, such an excellent job in raising the profile of this issue and garnering the widespread support of MSPs and local councillors. And I think it was obvious to all who were in the crowd that day that, to come back to Christine Graham's point, it transcends the generations. There were young people there who spoke. There were older people there who spoke. There were a lot of people who, as the demonstration was taking place, people who had been doing their shopping in Perth City Centre, they joined in. And so I think that diversity has been reflected in the correspondence that we have received from the people who, quite rightly, in my opinion, have been venting their frustration. And I think part of that frustration came about because of the feel that there hadn't been a proper consultation process. By some accounts, I think there were fairly frequent library users who were unaware of that so-called consultation process, and I think that was deeply regrettable. Now, we've already heard this evening why these facilities are so important to our local communities. There is substantial evidence which shows that libraries generate meaningful economic, educational and social value. They are critical in tackling inequalities by providing wide-ranging learning resources to those who could otherwise not afford them. But we all know that libraries go far beyond just simple access to books and intellectual stimulation. They are social hubs and important for local networking, and that's even more the case in rural areas and, as Mark Ruskell quite rightly said, post-COVID. So I think we all owe our debt of gratitude to the facilities that libraries provide to our campaigners, and I am very happy to support the motion in the name of Mark Ruskell.
Thank you very much, Ms Smith. I now call Richard Lynner to be followed by Karen Adam. Up to 4 minutes, Mr Lynner.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking Mark Ruskell as well for putting this motion down before Parliament? In September last year, I asked the Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture how the Government planned to support the retention of Scotland's public libraries. With an air of casual indifference, he told Parliament that on top of the general revenue funding to local authorities, the Scottish Government provided £665,000 a year to the Scottish Library and Information Council. But for more than a decade, funding to Scotland's local councils has been disproportionately cut by this Government, so that the pressure on municipal libraries is becoming unbearable. And he must have known that a payment which is static in cash terms is a cut in funding year on year in real terms. In fact, since this Government came to power, spending on our public libraries is down, book stocks are down, library staff numbers are down, librarians are down, opening hours are down, and over 120 public libraries have closed for good. And libraries matter. They are a vital part of our children's education. They combat digital exclusion and social isolation. They are anchor institutions which can help stimulate the urban regeneration of our towns and city centres. They represent a world beyond the market, a safe, equal, democratic, free space, not run for profit, but for enlightenment. In an increasingly digital society, libraries are not needed less, they are needed even more. In an age of deliberate online disinformation, fuelled by right-wing politicians and media, they provide an antidote, curated sources where the provenance can be trusted. And literacy does not just enhance people as units of economic production, it enriches them as human beings. Literacy is an end in itself. The pleasure of reading broadens horizons, so it is my belief that public lending and reference libraries represent one of the most enduring and successful forms of state cultural provision over the last century and a half. It's no accident that 100 years ago, 20 years before the creation of the National Health Service, Nye Bevan chaired the Library Committee of the Tredegar Workmen's Institute. And in the face of the depression of the 1920s and 30s, they did not close branches down, they opened new branches up. Because in the municipal... yes, I will give way.
Murdo Fraser, briefly.
I'm very grateful to Rich Lennon for giving way and admire his praise for Nye Bevan and other socialists. But would he recognise the role of capitalists, entrepreneurs and philanthropists such as Andrew Carnegie for the role they played in providing libraries free for working people?
Richard Leonard.
I've got a certain view about Andrew Carnegie and the part that he played in a steel dispute in America in the 19th century, but that's perhaps for another day, presiding officer. Because let me return to the municipal road to socialism. Libraries were a burning flame of knowledge. They symbolised that change was possible. They came to represent an understanding that progress is not simply measured by material conditions alone, that you can rise with your class, not out of your class. It's an idea which is in danger of being extinguished. So finally, I was struck when I visited Falkirk Central Library on Monday. Libraries in this century are not just about books, but about the spoken word, free computer access, bus passes, local history, football memories, Lego sessions, the lending out of jigsaw puzzles, free home library services for people who have difficulty getting out and about, musical instrument library, a book bug session, all in the one library. So let me finish with the words of the author Philip Pullman. Briefly. He said, "I love the public library service for what it did for me as a child and as a student and as an adult. I love it because its presence in a town or a city reminds us that there are things above profit, things that profit knows nothing about, things that have the power to baffle the greedy ghost of market fundamentalism."
Mr Leonard, thank you very much indeed. Even with the intervention, that would not have come in at 4 minutes. I now call Karen Adam to be followed by Paul Sweeney, up to 4 minutes. Ms Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I want to congratulate Mark Ruskell for securing this debate today. It's extremely important. And I am delighted to speak in it today as it allows me to put on record my profound gratitude to the campaigners fighting against library closures in Aberdeenshire and Moray councils. I've had the pleasure of working with them, and I know that one of them, Kate Johnston, is in the gallery this evening, and she's been a real force in the fight to save Cullen Library. She knows and understands how important they are. There's an apt quote by Professor R. David Lanks that said, "Bad libraries build collections, good libraries build services, great libraries build communities." And it is with and for these communities that I speak today. They understand, as I do, that libraries are vital hubs that provide far more than books. Their closures are not just a loss of service, but a blow to the very heart of our communities. The closure of libraries in Scotland, particularly in rural areas like Aberdeenshire and Moray, is a direct result of short-sighted cost-cutting councils. And these closures disregard the essential role libraries play in supporting children, older residents and those lacking digital access. And I just want to say, I don't doubt that the councils are struggling financially. We know it's really tough times. But to Tim Eagle and his contribution, what does he think 14 years of Tory austerity has done to our public services? And to Richard Leonard, whose party is upholding that and adding more pressure with national insurance tax on jobs. Constantly blaming the Scottish Government for these things, but the SNP Government are trying to help resolve this issue. When you're a local councillor, you set the priorities, you make the decisions, you have the power. The libraries earmarked for closure in my constituency of Banffshire and Buchan Coast, Cullen, Macduff, Rosehearty, Carnbog and more are not just buildings, they're thriving community centres. And both SNP council groups in those councils have offered budgets which do not include the cuts to library services. I was privileged to meet Save Cullen Library campaigners and host a public meeting to support them, and I must point out that all members of the public who attended that meeting were women, highlighting equality issues, which I'll come on to later in my speech. I also visited Macduff Library, where I met with a campaigner And I saw firsthand the lifeline that these spaces provide. In a cost of living crisis, libraries offer free internet and help residents navigate services. They also provide them warm spaces and social interaction. I saw the Children's Corner with sensory play, with vital health signposting, services indispensable to rural communities as costs soar. Closures will hit those who can least afford it, and children will lose reading clubs and after-school activities. Older residents, many already facing digital exclusion, will be cut off from resources and community connections. The Scottish Government does have a steadfast commitment to culture and communities. Despite that Westminster austerity, they've delivered a record £34 million to boost the culture budget this year, part of a £100 million pledge by 28-29, and local authorities will receive an extra £5 billion and an extra £144 million announced just yesterday to cover UK government-imposed national insurance costs that threaten public services. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, ultimately this is an equalities issue. Under the Equality Act 2010, the Public Sector Equality Duty compels local authorities to consider how their decisions impact people with protected characteristics such as disability, age and gender. Most of these fall into the bracket of library users who will be impacted negatively by closures. Council must take this responsibility seriously. Any failure to do so not only risks harming the most vulnerable, but gives potential legal challenges. And ignoring equality is unjust, but it's also unlawful. Stand up for your communities and please save our libraries.
Okay, thank you. The last couple of speeches have come in over the time limit. If this continues, those speaking later in the debate are not going to get the full allocation. I call Paul Sweeney up to 4 minutes, to be followed by Maggie Chapman.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I would like to also congratulate Mr Ruskell, Member for Bid Scotland and Fife, for securing this debate today on an issue that affects all of our communities. After all, libraries are so much more than places you just go to borrow a book, although an important core service, of course. They are central to building communities and inspiring generations. Indeed, if you look back, Deputy Presiding Officer, at the history of the public library system in Scotland, the immense expansion of it in the late 19th century was truly a remarkable social achievement. In 1885, only 5% of Scots had access to a public library. That grew to almost universal provision by 1920. Indeed, the wake of the 1872 Education Act, expanding primary education from 5 to 13 years, drove demand for public libraries across Scotland, and we saw that reflected in the growth of municipal socialism in cities like Glasgow, with the private bill passed in 1898 to establish the first public library system. Perhaps it was, in a way, the first public-private partnership, because there were significant acts of philanthropy around that time as well. And we heard earlier about the Dunfermline-born steel magnate and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie, who, despite his checkered history in regards to workers' rights, approved funding for 2,509 libraries across Britain and the United States in the early 20th century. His quote was, "A library outranks any other one thing a community can do to benefit its people. It's a never-failing spring in the desert." In 1901, Mr Carnegie wrote to Glasgow Lord Provost Samuel Chisholm, describing how he and his family had sailed from the Clyde bound for New York a half-century before, and he wished to donate money so that Glasgow could build new free libraries for Glaswegians, to make all of us, in his letter to the Lord Provost, saying, "Glasgow has done so much in municipal affairs to educate other cities and help herself." He added, "It is a privilege to help her." And although his sizeable donation of £100,000 set in motion Glasgow's public library system, which saw the creation of 15 public libraries across the city, it was still a requirement for the corporation of the city to finance the operation of those libraries and indeed to fill them with books. So there was a codependency there, but also they were built with great ambition, municipal ambition in mind. Inverness architect James Rind was successful in winning the competition to design 7 of them, and they still are to this day magnificent exemplars of Edwardian Baroque architecture. And I'm sure the Minister is familiar with, of course, Denniston Library, which was one of James Rind's great achievements. Carnegie said that a library outranks any other one thing a community can do to benefit its people. So we should be in agreement with him, at least, even if we don't necessarily agree with his model of capitalism. And of course, that public library system in Glasgow culminated in the creation of the Mitchell Library, which is probably the most famous library in Scotland, surmounted by its magnificent bronze dome dominating the M8 through the city, with the figure of Minerva, the Roman god of wisdom, above it. And I think that is still the symbol of what the public library system in Scotland means today. It's imparting wisdom to the people of this country. And even as we hold vast amounts of information in the palm of our hand today. With a smartphone and internet connection, our public library remains an essential public service that provides free access to technology, education and social connection. And we know that that is particularly true in an intergenerational sense, with older people particularly socially excluded and digitally excluded. And we have known from Age Scotland and others how important that provision of libraries are to that regard. We also need to recognise the threat that has been faced by libraries across Scotland, as we've heard this evening, with numerous libraries in Glasgow, including Maryhill, Whiteinch and the Cooper Institute, facing closures recently as 2021 and having to secure their future has been an ongoing campaign. I would encourage the Minister to consider how we can apply public service and modernisation and a bit of entrepreneurialism in the spirit of our Victorian forebears, as we can renew that public library system to this day. We could secure the legacy of those great Victorian buildings and renew them for a new social purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Sweeney. Before calling the next speaker, I'm conscious of the number of speakers that still want to participate in the debate, so I'm minded to move a motion without notice under Rule 8.14.3 to extend the debate by up to 30 minutes. I invite Mark Ruskell to move such a motion.
Moved, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Do members agree to extend the debate by up to 30 minutes? That is agreed. We therefore move on. I call Maggie Chapman to be followed by Michael Mara. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Chapman.
Thank you. I thank my friend Mark Ruskell for securing this important debate. I thank the groups and organisations who sent us informative briefings, but most of all, I thank my constituents who've been in touch to share their experiences and insights. Because this is about human stories, how we live in community, how we share our lives in neighbourhoods. This is fundamental for us as Greens, for libraries are sites of radical redistribution, experiments in shared sustainability, models of resistance against capitalist appropriation and waste. Libraries are where community happens, where creativity flourishes, where literature, art and philosophy resist the oppression of the rights culture wars. Every day in our libraries, quiet revolutions happen, revolutions that won't be homogenised. Perhaps it's unsurprising that they are under attack, but it's utterly unacceptable. And I stand with all those, especially those across the North East, who are fighting to reverse closures and resist those which are threatened, those acts of societal and cultural vandalism. In Aberdeen, some of the most deprived communities are still bleeding from the loss of 6 local libraries 2 years ago. In Dundee, proposals are live for 3 to be merged into a hub, again affecting those least privileged with fewest alternatives. 7 are threatened in Murray, and an incredible 13 in rural Aberdeenshire. There are common features to all these attacks. First, a failure of transparency. My constituents don't know what's being considered until it's too late. Future plans are hidden, legal advice kept secret. Second, a failure of consultation, of genuine participation. People are making their views known, clearly, eloquently, but decision makers don't listen. It's not really consultation when you're simply told what's going to happen, or when it only takes place after closures have already happened. Third, a failure of evidence-based decision-making. Cases for closures are unclear at best, with paltry savings or inflated running costs identified, sometimes no explanation given at all. Libraries selected for closure are often both the most efficient, in terms of cost per hour they are open, and the best used, with rising numbers of local people active in them, especially since COVID. Most devastating of all is the complete failure to understand what libraries are, how they work, why they are essential. The law's vague promise of adequate provision is, ironically, so inadequate. Because even if we forget everything else that libraries do and just talk about books, we can see how crucial that work is. In our child poverty crisis, parents and carers need that physical space where children can encounter and explore books, where they can touch and play with them, hear and read them, take them home. Click and collect and doorstop delivery can't do this. Books aren't DIY widgets or pints of milk. Reading isn't a transaction, but an adventure, and we don't know where we're going until we get there. And what's true for children is true for adults too, especially those who are alone, who are isolated, excluded or marginalised. We are in LGBT History Month and Race Equality Week, a week with a theme of every action counts. In libraries, every action really does count. Library staff do fantastic work in curating collections around the themes that people really need. They give practical information, sometimes life-saving, but they tell a true story too. You are not alone. You are accepted, cherished, part of community, here and beyond. When we lose our libraries, we lose paths we might have trodden, adventures we might have taken, hope we might have shared. My constituents stand for that hope. They stand in resistance, and I stand with them.
Thank you very much, Ms Chapman. I now call Rose McCall to be followed by Michael Mara. Up to 4 minutes, Ms McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to echo the comments made by others and thank Mark Ruskell for securing the debate this afternoon, and to echo his thanks to librarians and volunteers. Libraries deliver a range of benefits which place them as a key to Scottish Government's priorities, such as improving literacy, closing the attainment gap, tackling social isolation and closing the digital divide. The health and wellbeing offer from libraries alone is estimated to bring a cost saving to the NHS in Scotland of £3.2 million a year. With sustained investment, libraries have the potential to deliver transformational outcomes for the people of Scotland. And I don't think anyone here would dispute these assertions. In fact, I think we all agree. However, we're faced with a situation where local authorities such as Perth and Kinross have been forced to pursue a path to close some rural libraries. Now, I've been a councillor and I understand the budgetary pressures which councils are faced with every budget cycle. But it doesn't have to be this way. And I want to focus on one rural library in particular for the rest of my contribution, because I took the time to visit Auchterarder Library to see for myself just how much of an impact the closure would have. So for those of you that don't know, Auchterarder Library is the epitome of a rural library. It's small, well-stocked, provides the community with books, puzzles, toilet facilities, free Wi-Fi, free access to digital books, digital newspapers and e-books, printing services, seating. It holds events, book clubs, bookbug children's reading groups. You can even bring your dog. I think we can agree this is an excellent service. On top of that, the library is 200 metres down the lane from the back of the primary school. The primary school is on the campus with the community school of Auchterarder, so it would be easily accessible for homework clubs and after-school support, a suggestion that has been put to Perth and Kinross Council. But keeping the library open and providing an after-school solution for working parents seems a little of a stretch too far. At that visit, I had to queue to speak to the receptionist. There was a group sitting in the back area, which is an area often used for story time. I was stopped on a couple of occasions by a few people who were in the library and wanted to highlight how important it was to the local area and to raise their concerns with me. A gentleman was working all set up using the Wi-Fi, and by chance, I was delighted to meet Shirley Williams, one of the diligent campaigners who has worked to present Perth and Kinross Council with a petition of over 7,000 names calling for this cut to be stopped. This inspiring group have highlighted that the consultation process employed by Culture Perth and Kinross has been flawed and rushed, in their opinion. The opening of Perth Museum has, by their own admission, been given priority, so now everything is being done at speed. This is particularly concerning to me, and I urge Culture Perth and Kinross to ensure that the consultation process has been handled properly. Equally, Presiding Officer, the irony is not lost on me that this excellent Perth Museum will host the final letter by Mary Queen of Scots, written just a few hours prior to her death, to celebrate the centenary of the National Library of Scotland by the same Culture Perth and Kinross that's looking to close its rural libraries. But for me, the most important point is that the closure of rural libraries discriminates against children living in rural areas, which goes against the terms of the UNCRC. The UNCRC states that every child has equal rights, including the rights to information and culture. The library is the only publicly funded cultural outlet in Auchterarder. Take that away and the local children of this ever-growing town will be at a disadvantage, and that can't be allowed to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Michael Mara to be followed by Murdo Fraser. Up to 4 minutes. Mr. Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank Mark Ruskell for bringing the debate to the campaigners and professionals who had the privilege to meet this afternoon, and their very evident passion for our public libraries across Scotland. I could more than fill 4 minutes with my personal love of libraries, Presiding Officer, the atmosphere, the smell of them, the quiet sounds. I could list my favourite ones, the Mitchell in Glasgow, the Shaw at the London School of Economics, the British Library by King's Cross, but none of them come close to Lochee Library in Dundee, where I hold my surgeries, where my mother took my infant children for their Thursday morning reading group. A library that was built among the mills where my family worked, where they arrived from Ireland, and that library that served as both a literal and metaphorical escape for many people in Lochee from those mills. And the survival of many of Dundee's libraries and public libraries is partly on the basis of their protection by the listed status of their buildings. And what that leads to, Presiding Officer, is a very difficult situation where many of those most at threat in Dundee are in the post-war housing schemes that line the periphery of the city, because they don't have that listed status. Because removing the library function from them, from these listed buildings, would leave them as a burden on the council rather than a purpose, than an asset. So it's undoubted, and it's been a long-term fight for many of those communities to make sure that they can hold on to those libraries. And it's right, as other colleagues have pointed out, there are real equality issues in that, given the pattern of poverty within my home city. Which brings me to Douglas in the east of the city. Douglas Community Centre and Library is currently under threat. Proposals in front of the council in the current budget round are on the table to close that facility. The local management group have raised a petition of 794 signatures to date, and this weekend the door-to-door campaign to try and keep that community centre and library open past 1,000 signatures. And congratulations to all those campaigners fighting for to make sure that that is protected. They are to be replaced by a library space in a new community campus miles away from Douglas. And the council officer who related to me seeing the plans for that library space told me that she wept when she saw them. These libraries to be replaced by literally 3 shelves of books for these, not just for the children of that school, but the community at large. So there is a real question then, as colleagues were saying at lunchtime, that this comes to a question of adequacy that sits within the legislation. Nobody really thinks that that is an adequate replacement. It's playing the game, playing the legislation to cut these libraries and to remove them from people. I stand with and listen to all the comments that people have made about the social purpose of our library system, what it can do for people, how important it is as a place of refuge, a place of friendship, a place of learning, a place of advice. Certainly the libraries in my city are part of that, and we have to protect them.
Thank you, Mr Marrow. Now, the final speaker in the open debate, Murdo Fraser, up to 4 minutes. Mr Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I congratulate Mark Ruskell on securing this debate? And he and I both spoke at the rally he referred to that Liz Smith also mentioned a few weeks ago, when more than 300 people stood in sub-zero temperatures in the centre of Perth to rally in support of libraries. And I pay tribute to the many campaigners there and others from other parts of Scotland too, who've come to the cause to fight for their local libraries. Unlike Liz Smith, I've received a huge volume of correspondence from constituents. In fact, I can't think of an issue over the last few weeks that's generated more correspondence than this issue of library closures in Perth and Kinross. And I'd also pay tribute to the Save Alyth Library and Save Burnham Library campaign for their very helpful briefing for this debate. We've heard a lot in this debate about the value of libraries. I'm not going to repeat everything we've heard, because I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. Libraries are not just there as sources of learning, they're also there as important community assets, a community space hosting a variety of different events. And also, of course, let's not forget, at a time when older people in particular are suffering from isolation, loneliness and increasing costs of fuel, there are warm spaces where older people in particular, and those who otherwise might be trapped at home alone, can gather and meet and have human company, and that should not be underestimated. So what is this all about? Well, I have to disagree gently with Karen Adam, because I don't think this is a matter down to the choices of individual local councils. Because in my area, we have a SNP-run Perth and Kinross Council. In her area, I know Aberdeenshire the Conservatives or the administration. Tim Eagle, drawing on his experience as a local councillor in Murray, very fairly made the point that no councillor anywhere in Scotland wants to be closing a library. This fundamentally comes back to the door of the budget settlement given to local councils by the Scottish Government. And I won't rehearse all the arguments I made yesterday in the budget debate, presiding officer, but we are in a situation where the Westminster Block Grant is at record levels, and yet councils across Scotland are having to make very difficult decisions about cutting services like local libraries, and also at the same time talking about increasing council tax at unprecedented levels, 10% or more in different parts of Scotland. So clearly something is not right, and that comes back to the door, I'm afraid, of the SNP government. And just to respond to Mr McKee's intervention to Tim Eagle about the money, I read today that the cost of the new Barlinnie prison in Glasgow is now gone up to £1 billion. It has increased tenfold over the original estimate. Perhaps if the Scottish Government looked a little bit more carefully at where it's spending its money, we'd find a little bit extra money for local councils to support their libraries. And the final point I'd make, presiding officer, is I don't think the council in Perth and Kinross can hide behind a group like Culture Perth and Kinross. Culture Perth and Kinross is an ALIO, an arm's-length organisation wholly funded by Perth and Kinross Council. Councillors have to take responsibility for this and ensure that the funding is adequate to make sure libraries are supported. I hope the SNP-led administration on Perth and Kinross Council will listen to the campaigners and take the right decisions to ensure that funding is there. But fundamentally, it comes back to the door of the Scottish Government. They have to step up and make sure councils have the support so we don't lose these vital local resources that we all agree must remain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Fraser. And I now call on Ivan McKee to respond to the debate. Minister, up to 7 minutes, please.
Indeed, Presiding Officer, and thank you, and thank to Mark Ruskell for securing this members' debate on the very important issue of public libraries this evening. And there has been some very interesting contributions and some very personal reflections on the use members have made and continue to make of libraries across the country. Both my colleague Angus Roberts, who of course is the Cabinet Secretary for Culture in the Government, and I are avid supporters of our public libraries and commend the tireless work of our librarians across the country to keep these services thriving. The Scottish Government as a whole deeply values our public libraries and firmly believes that everyone should have access to these services. Libraries provide a wide array of essential services and consistently demonstrate their crucial role within our communities across Scotland, thanks to the dedication and passion of all those working within the library sector. So we're truly grateful for their efforts in helping public libraries evolve and maintain those vital services. Libraries' tremendous response during the pandemic as one of the only open cultural venues across Scottish communities offering lifeline services showcased that commitment. We're pleased to see such passion and dedication in communities across Scotland for our library services, and we understand how valuable the opportunities being provided via libraries are for people from all walks of life and ages. Libraries offer a free, inclusive space for people. They provide a wide range of benefits, offering essential access to learning materials and resources that might otherwise be out of reach. They are key in providing access to IT, bridging the digital divide, closing the attainment gap, enhancing educational outcomes, supporting children and young people in early years, and engaging our older citizens and empowering our communities. They have a fundamental role to play in building strong, resilient communities, allowing people to come together, to learn, to connect, to engage and create. And like Christine Graham, I'll be holding my constituency in Ridley Library on Friday of this week. According to the 2023 Scottish Household Survey data, libraries, including mobile and online, were the most frequently visited cultural event or place across the country. 16% of adults visit a library at least once a week, and over a third visit a library at least once a month. So, as members will of course know, library policy is devolved to our local authorities, who have a statutory duty to ensure there is adequate provision of library services for their residents. And I can respond to Mark Ruskell and commit the Government will engage with our local network on that adequate provision definition. Indeed, yeah, I have.
Michael Marr.
I appreciate the Minister giving way. Does he agree with me that the situation that's been proposed in Dundee, where these various library facilities are being closed, and what's been proposed in replacement for them as the adequate, as he points out, is the legislative framework, is for 3 shelves of books, is not in any real way an adequate replacement for these facilities?
Minister.
I'm not familiar with the specifics of the library in Dundee he talks about, but that does on the surface of it sound to be pushing the definition rather far. I'm sure my colleague Angus Robertson, who leads for the government on this, will be happy to pick that specific up with Michael Marr. Yeah, I'm just concerned about my time.
I can give you a bit of time back, Minister. Mark Ruskell, briefly, please.
Can I welcome his answer to my question, and can I just follow it up with another question, which is when will the government review that adequate provision?
Minister.
Well, as I say, I'm speaking for Angus Robertson this evening, and I'm sure he'll be happy to engage with Mark Ruskell on the specifics of that. But as I say, the government is happy to take forward that engagement process on that definition. Turning to the issue of funding, which has occupied much of the debate this evening, the Scottish Government has provided block grant funding of over £14 billion to local authorities in this financial year 24-25, which is a real terms increase of 2.5%. And in the following financial year 25-26, assuming our budget passes later this month, local authorities will receive record funding of £15 billion, a further real terms increase of 4.7%. So when members talk about they're in favour of a small state, they should recognise that libraries are very much part of the state, and those are the kind of services that are under threat when they argue for that kind of economic and social policy. Local authorities are independent corporate bodies, of course, with their own powers and responsibilities. While meeting their statutory obligations, it is, of course, up to each local authority how it manages its decision-making process, and it's for locally elected representatives to make those local decisions on how best to deliver services to their communities. We urge local authorities to consider any decision around public libraries extremely carefully and encourage our colleagues at the local level to work in partnership with communities to explore ways of delivering those services based on local need. And for our part, we will continue to work with local government to ensure that the people of Scotland continue to receive high-quality public services they expect and deserve. I listened with interest to some of the imaginative suggestions from Paul Sweeney and others, which will be, I'm sure my colleague Angus Robertson will be interested to take up. I think I'm very short on time now.
If it's brief, Christine Graham.
I just think I meant to pop this in, but I would think the Minister would probably take the opportunity to compliment the mobile libraries across Scotland that go into even remoter parts of my constituency and in the Highlands and Islands.
Indeed, I do. As already been mentioned, the Scottish Government supports our libraries through our funding to the Scottish Library and Information Council, provide leadership and advice to Scottish ministers, local authorities and the wider library sector. We support them with annual funding of £665,000, including £450,000 for the Public Library Improvement Fund. That, of course, is on top of the Scottish Government's general revenue funding to local authorities. And for 24-25, 13 individual projects were awarded PLIF funding across the country. A further £270,000 has been allocated for the 25-26 budget to SLIC, subject, of course, to the budget passing later this month to allow them to expand on the important work that they carry out. Our culture strategy for Scotland and its action plan sets out actions designed to meet the needs of communities, including how the cultural outcomes from libraries at our local level are at the forefront of that. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I want to thank Mark Ruskell again for lodging this motion and holding this debate. I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to respond on the vital role of our public libraries in advocating for the unique place they have at the centre of our communities. It's of critical importance that local authorities think very carefully about the future of these services, and I'm proud that the Scottish Government continues to invest in and support our public libraries to provide a service fit for the future. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you to colleagues for their cooperation in allowing us to get in as many speakers in the time available, and that concludes the debate. I close this meeting of Parliament.